Extreme left, lawyer Edwin Sifuna. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
We also have lawyer Ambrose Weda. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It's definitely be a very, very active weekend. And now, NASA leader Raila Odinga maintains there will be no election if the raft of demands are not met. Odinga says, among other demands, IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba must go. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Chaguzi itafanywa kulingana na masharti ile ambayo NASA imeweka. Inaitwa the irreducible minimum conditions, which must be fulfilled before we go for a repeat presidential elections. We are ready, but we are ready on our own terms.
All right, so let's start with you, Ambrose Weda. A raft of changes that NASA has demanded, and your thoughts as to whether these are fair changes. After all, it actually works for everybody when IEBC is in a good position to conduct free and fair elections.
Thank you so much. I think NASA has a plot which they're executing, and it is fairly a legal plot. The law requires that repeat elections be done within 60 days. You do not comply, then you have a problem with the Constitution and you have a constitutional crisis. So what does the NASA want? They want to tinkle with the 60 days in such a way that there are no elections. So what do? Make demands that will make it impossible to conduct elections within the 60 days. So the demands that they are making are aimed at ensuring that there are no elections. Otherwise, Chiloba as an individual would not stop elections, would not stop credible or incredible elections. But if you say mess it up, muddy it up as much as possible so that there are no elections, then you tell President Uhuru after 60 days, now you are in office illegally, now you either get out or we share this government, we have a government of national unity, then we share it. That is the game plan. We better see it for that and understand. Otherwise, technology itself is good technology, depending on how it is used. And just because the Supreme Court, in a judgment that I know will not stand the test of time because it is erroneous, gave a decision. Now the whole thing is, everything is so bad that we cannot hold elections.
But don't you think whether that some of the demands that they are making are purely on the basis that the elections need to be free and fair? Don't you think they are reasonable demands that NASA is making?
Like which one?
The eight that she has.
The eight are actually, if you say we do not want the electronic system from that MOFO, whoever they are, then you are saying you return afresh. They dragged IEBC for years in court. You have to return. How long does it take? Beyond 60 days. If you are going to return for ballot paper printing, you have to beyond 60 days. The question is this: did they even complain about the entire system? No. They had no problem with the ballot papers after they were delivered, when they were cast. Their problem was with the transmission of the results. So that they'll say, if they were saying, look, we are not going, we do not want the results transmitted through the electronic system, which originally they are the ones who insisted upon it. Let us count the papers at the polling stations, add them up, carry the forms to a general center, the tallying center, add them with a calculator and declare a winner. Right. It would be a lot easier. But what do they want? They say we want new technology. How long will it take? Beyond 60 days. After that, what happens? They shout themselves into power. That's what they want. Right. Shouting into power.
Edwin,
breaking into
your comments to that this is a plot by NASA to ensure that we do not have the elections on the 17th. And it could be consistent because we've had some of the NASA leaders very clearly say that we are not going to have elections.
You know, there's a lot of double speak from Jubilee. First of all, they've been going up and down the country crying that their victory was robbed and making sure that they make it clear that the Supreme Court said there was no fault on the part of Uhuru Kenyatta and that the fault was solely with IEBC. Then you propose to them that we want to solve the fault so that this time round, if you are declared winner, they will be... Yes, absolutely. That's the question that you've posed to my senior Weda. that isn't it in the interest of everyone for IEBC to get it right? I mean, you know, even you guys in the media are making it seem like NASA is asking for an arm and a leg. The proposals can be boiled down to 2 proposals only on reform, so that we can actually have a process that we can call free and fair. That the suppliers of equipment and biomaterial in this particular election needs to be relooked at. We need to get people who are credible. And whereas my senior knows that in law, you actually allow direct procurement in cases of urgency. That is our electoral law. And in fact, people like Al Ghurair were beneficiaries of the direct procurement system. So this argument that somehow it will take outside of 60 days is a bit ridiculous. Number 2, the court has said there were irregularities and illegalities committed by officers of the IEBC. We are not saying we want the commission to go. And by the way, I was in this very studio. You had not done the upgrade. But we were making the argument during the push to have the commissioners removed that the commission is the commissioners. If you recall that conversation, the commission are the commissioners. So that if we are pushing for the removal of a sweeper at IEBC, you cannot threaten us with a constitutional crisis because there are no sweepers at IEBC. And I actually argue that Ezra Chiloba is an employee just like the girl who serves tea at IEBC, who serves at the pleasure of the commissioners. He himself has said here that Ezra Chiloba alone cannot stop an election in this country. We are saying the court has identified where the problems were. For instance, Mike, and my senior here needs to be a little bit honest, even from an intellectual point of view. We have a standing court order of the Supreme Court for access to the database and the equipment and the technology that was used in the election. That was not complied with. We have singled out individuals based on their role. For instance, Mr. Mohati, who is the ICT director, I sat there in that room with him because I was in charge of the review of the technology during the court process. And at 4:45, 15 minutes to the deadline that the court had given, he is telling us he himself is unable to log into the IEBC servers. This is somebody who the court order was directed at. And the IEBC CEO is the person responsible for ensuring that the court order was actually complied with. I mean, so even from the basis, and I keep reminding him, and Weda knows, contempt of court is a punishable offense in this particular country. So if there is somebody, and you see, when we talk about the rule of law, and he knows that the basis of the rule of law in any country is obedience of court orders. So you have an institution that even in the face of a Supreme Court order, the highest court in the land, they will sit back and say we will not comply. Yet you want to put these people in place, yet these same people want to claim protection of the same law that they do not have regard for. I mean, it's ridiculous. The question that you have posed to your viewers is the most important question, and it's the only question we need to ask ourselves. Are these people who got it so wrong, so badly, the same people that we want to trust with this particular process? What is this new understanding or appreciation of the law or processes of election that Chiloba has developed that we now actually can say, okay, he will get it right? He will not get it right. Let's get somebody else to do it. Kenya has no shortage of talent. Even Weda here, if you remove his affiliations to Jubilee and the need to help them, yes, he probably would conduct, absolutely.
All right, and that it doesn't stop there. I'm coming to you, Weda, but NASA leader Raila Odinga says they cannot go back to the polls with IEBC as currently constituted. Odinga maintains that 12 poll officials led by CEO Ezra Chiloba must go home before the poll agency can conduct free, fair, credible elections. He says that should Chiloba stay put, he will face the same wrath Isaac Hassan and his team suffered. This is what he had to say.
Remember the Kivitu Electoral Commission, the Isaac Hassan Independent Electoral Commission, and now the IEBC led by Chiloba. They will not survive. Bwana Chiloba akikataa kutoka, ataona yale ambaye Bwana Isaac Hassan na wenzake waliona.
Ambrose Weda, what do you make of that statement? Are we looking at having other street protests coming up?
I think I told you that these people are trying to barge into power. Most of them have been in parliament long enough, and before the speaker comes, they hit the door, poop, poop. So they want to get power through that process, breaking into it. You hear about the audit that was being done, and they sent you as one of the people, ICT people, somebody who cannot open his own phone was sent. That's why we have this
Are you
confusion.
claiming
He
that
doesn't
Sifuna
know.
cannot open his own
I know you
Whether-
understand law deeply,
whether
but it's basic phone.
You
it
are
does
more
not.
likely to
But
be shut
allow-
out of your phone than I am.
Now, but let's come to this. Why is so much venom against Chiloba? My thinking is that Chiloba must have stopped the NASA team from their antics to hack into the system and multiply their votes.
Whether
That's
is-
my
that-
thinking.
that-
I'm
that
not
is
saying that,
speculative.
my opinion, yes.
That is
I said that's
speculative.
my speculation.
Yes.
But let us know that Mohato was able to tell you that he could not get into the system because now evidence has emerged and which was presented to you people that nobody in Kenya held the overall passport.
You see, you're not the one who doesn't
Please
understand.
listen. It was
He's
there in
the,
the
he
report.
is the oracle user of the
Listen,
system.
we-
Surely, whether.
Listen, if you look at the report that the registrar made, the registrar of the High Court,
I was there.
the evidence is there. Go and read it. So these people do not want Chiloba, maybe because Chiloba is a stumbling block to
Well,
the
let,
excess.
let,
But
let me pause you
Yes,
there because
yes.
this is speculative, but let's deal
Yes,
with facts.
yes.
The
Exactly.
fact that we have right now is
Yes.
that we are going back to the election because, according to the Supreme Court ruling, the IEBC did not do a job that was good enough for us to declare and say this is the current president that we have. That's where we are.
let me declare now.
So my
Yes,
question
yes,
to you
yes.
is, are you saying that IEBC, as it's currently constituted, you as WEDA or on behalf of Jubilee are
Yes.
confident that they're going to do a good job this time?
Let me answer this way. As we talk this morning, the majority of the decision of the Supreme Court has not come out to specify that this is where the problem was. Unless they are leaking to NASA at night what they are writing. As we talk now, Sifuna and myself, even the president does not know which part of the IBC system and who among the
So would
personnel
you
went
suggest
on
that we wait for that ruling
that
before
would
we
have
do
been,
anything?
No,
that
no,
would
Mike.
have- before we hound out people. Because you go to, if you now look at it preliminarily, the agents in Mombasa are the ones who didn't sign their forms. If you reach where you have to wait so that the court, the Supreme Court majority decisions comes out to tell us the reason why we nullified this election is because we found this anomaly and this anomaly and this were perpetrated by so and so and so and so and so and so. Then we take the decision and say, at this rate, please let's push these people. Before they do that, NASA has already drafted their own. Either they're in cohort with the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court had just certain people they want out so that they can budge, they can break into power. Otherwise, as we talk now, there is no reason why you should cry that with Chiloba, you are out. Without Chiloba, you are in. We are victimizing somebody before we know.
You know,
whether it did anything
you know, Mike, let me advise you again. Please don't subject your viewers to speculators when you have people who are actually in the room. When the report by the registrar was being prepared, I was there. When it was submitted in court, I read it. WEDA has not read it. Mr. Mohati, and I'm quoting him verbatim and invite him to contradict me if he wants. He said at 4:45, he is unable to log into his own server because they're experiencing communication difficulties. That is what is in the report in the Supreme Court. And that is where the ridiculousness comes in. Because, you see, the proposal was, let's create login credentials for the NASA technology experts for them to be able to access and read the server, that so-called read-only access. We were not able to do that. At 4:45, the expert who was seconded from the judiciary proposes that, okay, if they are not able to log in using the credentials that you've created for them, why don't you log in using yours? Because you are a super user of the system, and you can turn the machine towards their experts and let them read and make copies of whatever it is they want. He said he was unable to do so. Number two, what we are saying, you know, whether I want to remind you that the reason why your so-called victory was annulled is because there was blame apportioned to IEBC. Even if you go back with these particular guys, they will bungle it again and you will lose again at the Supreme Court. Do you want to do this thing in perpetuity? What we want you to understand is that we are not interested in sharing power with them. By the way, some of these guys, we just tolerate them because we find ourselves within the same borders with them. There is nothing we want to share. We don't want to share government with them. These are not, we will be pulling in different directions. While they believe in looting of the public resources, we want public resources to be safeguarded. We want education for our kids. We want to finish corruption. I mean, look at something like, ask yourselves the question, why did Msando have to die? Why did Msando have to die? Did he die so that we have credible elections, or did he die so that somebody can actually overturn the will of the people? And that is definitely
something that needs to be answered, but maybe on a different forum. Whether, let me come to you, and you've still not answered as to whether you're confident that IEBC, as it's currently constituted, will deliver free and fair elections. Are you confident?
Subject to what the Supreme Court will say, either today or tomorrow, I am very, very confident. That
so your suggestion would be we wait for the full text of
the Supreme Court ruling
they would before we do that. But we'll only have, we are now on to 28 days. We'll only have maybe 26 days to go.
Even if, yes. But if, because if I take what they are talking about, the Sava, Mohato, and the rest, Jubilee's position, in my view, and their position should be, let us count the ballot at the station where they are done, and let us add them. Let us add them. Let us open the ballot boxes. If I was in the Supreme Court, we would have opened the ballot boxes. But you don't open them because that one NASA knows they lost and they will lose again. So what do? Create another phantom complaint and say there was logarithm in the system. If the problem is in the system, our electoral system is about 70% manual. Let us go manual. This electronic, deep electronics was introduced by NASA, even when they were being told it is still too early with too little time. Let us this time go manual. Manual. Tell Jacob.
Now let me say something about this argument on waiting for the full text of the Supreme Court. It is intellectual dishonesty, once again. If you are a lawyer who knows the law on how an election should be conducted, who appreciates the standard of a free and fair election as set under our Constitution, who followed the arguments in court and the pronouncements of the Supreme Court judges, you should know the reason why this election was annulled. You should know that this particular election was annulled because the court was actually convinced that the standard of proof in an... the majority, that is how democracy works, my brother. The majority have their way, the minority will have their say. Now, if you look at the pronouncements that there were irregularities and illegalities, it is possible for you to identify. For instance, Mike, you are in charge of this particular show, and you have cameramen here. If that camera, for some reason, is actually focused outside of our discussion here, and the people have actually been looking at something else, then it is very easy for you to pinpoint and say the cameraman was probably asleep. So when you say that it was not conducted in accordance with the law, and you have somebody who calls himself the director of legal affairs at IEBC, that is the first person you do what? You focus on. Number two, because he has failed in the advisory role and to get the commission to a place where it can actually comply with the standards set by the law. If the failure of ICT, you are saying the transmission of the result was actually tampered with so that Form 34As and 34Bs that were bandia were actually being uploaded into the system. You get the director of the ICT, in addition to his failure to comply with the court order. Number three, if you say that there were forms, for instance, in places like the coast, which were fake forms being used to declare results, that is the director of operations, the person who's in charge of the entire operation. And the person with the utmost responsibility for the secretariat, that he can actually sit somewhere and accept fake forms and use it as a basis of declaration of the results, who is the CEO of the commission. So you don't need to wait for the full text. We know the people who are responsible for the mess. And I'm telling you, it will validate us.
All right.
It will validate
I want us to listen into what the NASA principal, Kalonzo Musyoka, also had to say about Saffron Morpho, which is part of the company that provided the technology that we're using, who again, by the way, have said will not be ready by the 17th to upgrade the system. But let's listen in to what Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka had to say.
The company called Saffron Morpho from France, which colluded in trying to subvert the will of the people of Kenya, must go.
Tunasema hii kampuni ya Ufaransa ambayo inaitwa Saffron Kwanza tunataka tujue local partners wao hapa ni kina nani.
All right, so it looks like it's one thing after another. Whether you want
Please
to comment
allow
on that?
me.
There's just two things, Mike.
Just keep quiet. It's just good to be patient. The way they are talking about transmission, fake forms, and what, and then you look at the fact that the decision has not come out to show us what they considered, but the gist was transmission. Jubilee would be saying, count the ballot papers manually where they are, and let us have the Form 34Bs collected physically. That would have been the demand of NASA, saying, we do not want this transmission system. We want a way where there's no logarithm. That would be a lot easier. You count it in Kandui, where it comes from. We send an helicopter to pick the forms. You bring it to Nairobi. They're all there. In the helicopter, you can be there. Joshua can be there. And then you pick the forms around and you bring them. They do not want that. Why don't they want that? Because they want to muddy the water in such a way that gives them an opportunity after the 60 days to barge into power. That is where the problem lies. So what do? Change goalposts every minute, make them as many as possible, and then change goalposts. So if you score in A, they tell you that was not the goal we were talking about. You score in B, they tell you, no, that's outside. That is why we are saying NASA would like to see chaos in this country.
No, Mike.
We are praying very hard. Jehovah will ensure that there will be no chaos.
You know, Mike, I think we just need to be true to ourselves and to have some level of fidelity to morality in this country. You see, the problem with the transmission, and this is the reason why we are raising issues against Safran, that they could not guarantee the integrity of the transmission process, of the transmission technology. That people were actually, people who were not supposed to be accessing the system were able to access the system. That there were allegations that Form 34s that were being uploaded by the returning officers could be replaced. I mean, it is about the integrity of the transmission process. It's not that we are arguing for a return to the manual transmission of results. This company that is called Safran have actually been found guilty of corrupt practices in Nigeria. And that is what Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka was referring to. We had a similar experience with Smith & Usman from the UK. And you saw that the UK Fraud Office actually opened charges against officers of Smith & Usman. And the same, which we expected to see heads rolling here in Kenya, they were protected by these Jubilee guys. So what we are saying is it is possible for us to get companies that are credible, that will guarantee the integrity of whatever system they give to us. I mean, that is not an argument for the return to manual processes. Even those ballots that they keep claiming, oh, let us count, let us recount, the ballots are in the boxes. The ballots are not in the boxes because the IEBC does not respect the law. The law says once ballot boxes are sealed, they can only be opened by a court order. You saw a returning officer in the county of Nairobi storming a place where the ballot papers had been stored and breaking the seals without any regard to the law. So even now, Weda knows that they have already tampered with the ballot papers in the ballot boxes. Okay. We cannot guarantee the accuracy.
So Sifuna, given all this raft of demands and...
It's not a raft of demands, Mike. I don't know why you're falling into the Jubilee trap. The demands, the proposals are only two. There are only two. Why would you call two things a number? They are just saying, they say a couple of demands. Number one,
semantics, okay,
exactly,
English.
That the suppliers of the technology and the ballot papers need to be relooked at. We could get other people who can guarantee the integrity of whatever system they provide for us to have a free and fair election. Number two, the people responsible for the mess in the IEBC should vacate office. They could be sent to departments in governments which have no, consequence if they mess up. Let Chiloba go and head the Ministry of Fisheries. We don't care. But we cannot have him run in elections.
Now, given those demands, those two demands that you've put on the table, do you think it's practical for them to be met and at the same time still meet the constitutional requirement of having the elections take place within the 60 days?
Absolutely. Mike, you see, for us as Kenyans, the biggest problem we have is we forget very easily. You remember during the ballot tender case, which was decided weeks to the election, and IEBC kept telling us that it was possible for them to comply with whatever order the court was going to give, and we would still have elections within the small time period. I have made reference to you that under our procurement laws, you actually allowed direct procurement in cases. I mean, the suppliers of ballot papers are known. This is not the first election that is being conducted in this country. So it is possible for us to get the technology in place. It is possible for us to get the ballot printing in place. It's possible for us to deploy Chiloba Chiloba to the Ministry of Fisheries as an officer there and get Kenyans of integrity to run this election within 2 days.
All right.
Please allow me to say this. In the run-up to the August election, NASA made sure that at every corner, IEBC was disrupted through avalanche of court cases and demands and threats. Luckily, within a short period, they were able to marshal themselves and render elections. Elections which I saw on the Borengo reported in the papers, telling people in Luo land, the Luo part of the land, that those who have filed the petitions should withdraw them. Because according to him, and his own election was very good, and it went on very well. But he is not advising Baba himself to stop harassing the country. You will find that the demands they are making, remove Chiloba, remove the kids, remove all these things, and then have a lacuna there, then start the process of recruiting other people so that 60 days elapses. They know it, and they are crafting. And I remember Honorable Borengo saying they have some kind of a Bakura's rag which they will pull out at the end. For instance, they may push, once they push Chiloba out, they ask chairman who comes from your region also to resign, then they say constitutional crisis. What we are looking at is that these people have seen the people running away from even their own places. Therefore, they do not want election. I can see NASA doesn't want election.
So what
doesn't want election.
So what do you suggest as a way forward from Jubilee's end? We just go to the elections with everything remaining as it was, despite the fact that we had the Supreme Court finding reason as to why we need to have a
and I think what Jubilee is preparing, what I think is proper, is for the Chief Justice and his 3 other colleagues to give us the grounds upon which they annulled an obvious victory for Jubilee. Then those things that they set out, the IEBC should take it, all of us should take it, look at it, and then we look at the irreducible minimum that can be achieved within the remaining days, then they are achieved. You get it? From what they use. It is not just NASA to go into their own bedrooms and then they write a raft, an avalanche of complaints. And they keep on changing.
Unfortunately for this country, even if you were to make a good proposal, it would be looked at differently just because of where it is originating. The proposal to have these minimum reforms are not bad proposals. They are not unreasonable proposals. The problem that WEDA has with them is that they were made or came from the person of Raila Odinga. So for you to insist that these things cannot be done, that we want to retain the same team, the very same team that you claim, or the Supreme Court apportioned the blame for what you claim to be your robbed victory. I mean, it is a height of ridiculousness. I mean, you cannot make that argument. So it is Jubilee who's actually pushing us into a constitutional crisis by trying to defend the indefensible. What is it that they are looking at? Because for us, we are very clear. If that election does not happen on the 17th, let Uhuru Kenyatta not imagine that he will remain in office. He is not going to be a president on the 17th. It is actually in his interest, if he has any chance of retaining his seat, for the election to happen.
And there was a caller who called asking, we're asking for Chiloba to be fired and all these changes to be made. Yet, on the other hand, we have the opposition saying that we have a caretaker president who, of course, has very limited roles. And also, why not have maybe observers or people who will come in and ensure that the elections are held credibly with the current team that we have?
First of all, it is not the opposition saying we have a caretaker president. It is a constitution that has limited the things that he can do in this particular period. It is the constitution, Mike. Don't, again, fall into this trap that is set for you in the media by WEDA and Co. It is the law. So for us, and even given the question that came through on the issue of the cost, I mean, honestly speaking, we are burdening the taxpayer for nothing. So it's like the 60 billion shillings, 50 billion shillings that we spent just went down the drain, and nobody wants to hold anyone responsible for that. I mean, we don't have the luxury of all these resources just being thrown around every single time. So we need to have a conversation on saying we need a commission that will get this thing right at the first attempt, so that if we have to repeat it, surely, the cost is too high, and which is why, out of the abundance of caution, we are saying the people who got it wrong surely should pave way for somebody else to try, give it a shot and see if we can get free and fair, credible elections. On the issue of observers, I mean, it is now internationally accepted that the people who came here as observers were Jubilee agents. Their work and interest was to protect certain commercial interests, and that, some of these countries and economies, their only interest is what they describe as stability, so that it doesn't really matter who is in power or how they got into power. For as long as they can exercise effective control over the natives, then they are okay with it. So you could see that they were pushing so hard for Raila Odinga to concede the election result, which when was subjected to the test of our Supreme Court could not stand. I mean, so for us, in fact, the issue of observers, we this time are going to be our own observers. And until we as Kenyans clear that process as credible and fair, nobody will tell us anything. We will subject it only to Kenyans and to Maraga.
All right, I want us to move on to something else. And Duale says the government, Duale says that the government will not succumb to opposition pressure, and even went ahead to make some very, very serious accusations. Let's listen in to what Duale had to say over the weekend.
Tarehe 17 wananchi wa Nairobi na Kenya mzima watapiga kura. Tutachagua rais. Tutaapisha rais. Wewe leta nyokonyoko, baada hapo tutakuonesha kuna serikali. Unajua hata kanjo wangu si wako na tear gas.
When our competitors say that it is not that they want to boycott the election, that there will be no election in Kenya, what are they telling us? There can only be two ways where there will be no election in Kenya. Either there will be a coup, or there will be violence and chaos. That is the only two options that are available to us. Tumwambie Bwana Raila Odinga, hatutakubali ya kwamba atalete fujo na mauaji na kumwaga damu katika taifa letu la Kenya. Hiyo haiwezekani, my friend.
All right, apologies. That was not Aden Duale. It was Governor Mike Sonko and Deputy President William Ruto. Let me start with you. Whether do you agree with what they have to say, that it is basically just a push from the opposition to ensure that there is no stability?
First of all, allow me to do three things. One, there is nothing like a caretaker president. That must be a failed state constitution. What we have is that now the president cannot make certain appointments. There are certain appointments now. He cannot make certain appointments and sackings. One. Two, the IEBC, the Supreme Court blamed IEBC in a decision which they are yet to give us details. When they give us details, then it will be apparent whether we need to reform IEBC or reform Supreme Court. If it is some unreasonable basic complaints that made them to nullify a serious election, we will look at the decision. If it's a pedestrian decision, which I suspect it is, we will then move to reform the Supreme Court so that we put people there who have a good intellect, can understand the electoral laws, and can do things that will stand the test of history. Number three, IEBC has the last say on the date. Within the 60 days, election can be on the 17th. They can push it, depending on what they are. But elections will be there. I know that NASA would want to overshoot the 60 days. So they'll jump up and down, left, right, and center. They'll want a few people to die here and their blood shed so that elections are not held within the 60 days. Then they say, caretaker president, now caretaker what? Let us share power. But we are saying elections will be there. We want the country to continue in a stable manner. So as you make allegations, please wait also for the Supreme Court, because we may also want the Supreme Court reformed as quickly as possible. before elections are held, so that when we go back to the Supreme Court after you lose again, you don't go to your people who tell you this time there's one form which did not have a watermark, therefore the whole election is bad.
Although in all fairness, if the forms were supposed to have a security feature, then that is the best.
Mike, no, let me clarify this.
If that is what was
Mike,
supposed to
let me
happen.
clarify this. It is not, the Constitution itself says it is not the form, it is the substance. If the form that does not have a watermark reflects the correct results, you don't throw it away just because it does not have a watermark.
Right.
If you have a form that just allows it, if you have a form which has a watermark but has the wrong results, you don't just accept it because it doesn't.
Let me say something.
Please.
It is always very unfortunate when a lawyer, a senior lawyer, an officer of a court, makes such disparaging remarks against a court. And number two, I know what really upsets Jubilee because they have this sense of entitlement. These are people, children of privilege. They don't understand how they can issue threats and those threats don't work. Weda sitting here knows it doesn't matter how many tantrums the president throws. The Supreme Court is not going anywhere because we are not protected by his benevolence. We are protected by the Constitution which we gave unto ourselves as Kenyans. So he can throw all the tantrums he wants. This is not his father's farm. This is Kenya, a country governed by a constitution. You saw this stupid petition by my brother, what is his name? Wambugu. That petition was meant to achieve anything other than the removal of a Chief Justice. There are absolutely no grounds, legal trash. I don't know who even helped him write it. It is going nowhere. So I can guarantee you that when Maraga sees the president throwing his arms or Weda on TV, he's sipping his tea pretty because his strength does not come from Jubilee. It comes from God and the Constitution that we granted ourselves. So make all the noise. And I know it's upsetting because you are people who are used to having your way. When you throw, tantrums and you want to scare people, and you see Sifuna is not scared. Maraga is not scared. It is very upsetting. We understand. But you need to calm down and understand that this country is governed by law.
We need to start winding up now. Should we be having a conversation where we are thinking about if we do not have the elections within the 60 days, where is Kenya? Is that a conversation possibly we should be thinking about, Edwin?
Personally, I haven't contemplated it because I have made parallels. If you have a jigger in your toe, you remove the jigger, you don't cut off your leg. It is very, very simple. We want to be assured, and it is in their interest as well, that if they are, by some miracle, declared winner in the repeat election, they need that election not to be annulled because of IEBC. So look at the options that we have. People are presenting a constitutional crisis vis-a-vis a few workers in IEBC leaving. I mean, it's not even a choice. As a country, we should say we want an end to this brinkmanship. So that when somebody stands there and says he will swear in the president on the 17th, is he the only one who has a Bible? We can swear Raila as well.
All right, and let's listen into that clip that you're referring to from the majority leader, Aden Duale, who basically says that there will be a swearing in of the President Uhuru Kenyatta should the opposition boycott the forthcoming election. Duale says the government will not succumb to opposition pressure.
Kama wewe umeleta vitisho ya kukataa kwenda uchaguzi, na mimi Duale nakuambia leo, wewe pia ujipange. Tuko tayari kuapisha Uhuru Kenyatta kwa muhula ya pili. Nasema lazima na Chebukati na commissioners wake, ukitaka kutoa Gulie ama Molu ama mfanyikazi wowote, utapitia sheria, kanuni ya sheria. Huwezi kupeleka maandamano IEBC kutoa wa commissioners.
Weda, your response to that?
The question is not if we don't have elections. The question should then be if we do not have elections within the constitutional days, 60 days. The same constitution says the current president will be president until another one is sworn in. That other one can only come through universal suffrage elections. So even if the NASA people, they twaddle, they hoof or poof, they will still face elections, which will then either give them a president or nail. So President Uhuru, assuming that they make noise so much and they frustrate everything that there are no elections within 60 days, President Uhuru will continue being president. Then the reforms they are talking about, those ones. We reform the Supreme Court, we reform all those people, the Chilobas and everybody. For the period it takes, if it requires a referendum, then there will be a referendum to alter the constitution. Then all throughout that period, the president will be in office, unfortunately with the current team, because he is not allowed to change certain people. Then we do elections. Then if that election, Joshua and his fellow dancers do not get it, then they bid goodbye or they go to the Supreme Court. If they lose, fine. If they don't lose and another Supreme Court says we go back for election, it will be that cycle.
I
That
see you
choice
shaking
we
your
make
head.
as a
See,
country.
Mike, he has given it away. That is their game. They're the ones who are not interested in having an election because in their narrow interpretation of the law, they believe that Uhuru continues. When the framers of the constitution put that clause there that he will remain president until the next one is sworn in, they envisaged that the process of election is something that is fixed in time and that time is short. Because what he is saying is effectively, all you need to do as somebody who wants to rule for life, as some of these people believe they're entitled to, is to ensure you get elected once and make sure there are never elections in the country. Then you will be like Mugabe. And what we are telling Uhuru Kenyatta and the Jubilee cohorts like Weda, no, he's a caretaker president, is also somebody who will force me to, you know. So I'm saying, we want to tell him very clearly that we will not accept him to last in office a day longer. What they're talking about is actually a coup. That is a coup, Mike, over the will of the people of Kenya. And we will not accept it.
But that,
when Duale says these things, I mean, wakiapisha, tunaapisha. What is the problem?
But what
There
kind
will
of
be
state
no
would
swearing.
that be?
The president will not be
That's
sworn.
what I'm saying. We need to
He's
sober
there, he's
up
already sworn
and
until a new
stop
one comes
this
in.
brinksmanship that Weda is trying to portend here and what the president is
But
saying.
Sifuna, as
We
per
can
the,
agree.
as per the current constitution, if there is no election, if we do not go to the election, then we continue with what you're calling a caretaker
That's what I'm
president.
telling you. It cannot continue. On the 17th, this
So what,
particular
what
arrangement.
would the alternative
this is what
be?
I'm
What
telling
would the
you.
alternative be
This
if
is what
that
I'm
does not
telling you,
continue
Mike.
legally?
Let me tell you what I am telling you is that the provision on the president incumbent continuing until the next one is sworn in is a temporary measure. It was not intended to last for 25 years. You cannot tell us
That is
it is
true.
right constitutionally for President Uhuru to remain president for 25 years
That is
without an
true,
election.
but the question
so
is,
what
for,
we are saying,
for the few days or months or
we
whatever time of time,
we know that the date has been set. The Supreme Court said 60 days. We have said we want an election. We are ready for an election. We want a few tweaks here and there. 2 demands only for us to be able to satisfy ourselves that we have a chance of a free and fair and credible election. That's all we are saying. On the other side, they are saying we will not touch the IEBC. We don't want any reforms. There will be no election. Uhuru will continue. He will not continue. Wakiapisha, tunaapisha.
Now, gentlemen, as we wind up, this definitely is a political situation that we are in. There definitely would have to be some ceding of ground from both
Exactly.
sides.
Yes.
From both sides. What do you think then Jubilee
I think
should
they
cede?
want a lacuna. They want where there's no president.
Maybe that's what they want, but the question is
break
that
it.
there'll have to be an agreement that is reached politically by both sides, which is why even IEBC needs to bring both parties into the negotiating table.
Which they don't come to
Please
meetings.
listen.
They don't
Why
come
then,
to meetings.
Why then go around, go to Mombasa, go to Mandera? Why not just say, what we want is nusu mkati? We realize that in a free, fair elections, we can't win. We want a nusu mkati. But now that you are not giving it readily, we are going to make so much noise, cause
All right,
so much
Weda,
trouble. that-
what should Jubilee cede in terms of having this negotiation? Because evidently, if both sides keep and stick to their guns, put their backs to the wall,
Yes.
then it looks like we may not have an election on the 17th.
What I'm saying, and let Kenyans hear this, let the Supreme Court render their decision today or tomorrow. The details, the ones, what they relied on, the malpractices they saw, those will have to be corrected. If the judgment does not bring out any serious, tangible complaints that they relied on, then it appears they were wrong and we go and reform the same Supreme Court. But if they are tangible, then we reform those areas, those that can be reformed within the 60
stipulated
days.
You
time.
see,
Then
Mike,
we move on.
let me be clear
Yes.
that the only negotiation we want to engage in at this particular point in time is on those irreducible minimums. What we can do for the IEBC, for our electoral system to ensure that the election on the 17th passes the test that has been set by our laws and our constitution. Now, the IEBC calls for a meeting. We show up at the appointed hour. Jubilee does not show up. I mean, and then they go to rallies in Bama and markets all over the place shouting themselves hoarse. Come to the table and say, why is it not possible for you? What is it you have against us having another ICT director at IEBC? What is it you have against us having another printer?
All right, gentlemen.
What is it you have against us
we'll
having
have to wind
another
up
supply
before
of
I hand
technology?
it over to Michelle. Your closing comments, Weda.
All I can say is that let us as a country remain stable, united. I know God is on our side. These electoral issues are part of growing up. We are growing, and in another 10 years, 15, we'll be very strong as a country. So people who think we are brains of war, we are going to fight and kill each other, please hold your horses. We are moving, and it will be well.
All right, Edwin Sifuna, your closing comments.
We have been very clear, and we are very articulate on the opposition side. We don't want to be second-guessed. We don't want you to put words in our mouth. The only people who are speaking about bloodshed and war and all sorts of things, and by the way, Mike, protests are still legal in this country. That is not part of the sections of the Constitution. 37 was not suspended because we have a caretaker president. You can still protest and demonstrate. So the people who are talking about war and bloodshed and coups are this side. All we are saying is, let us come to the table and talk about what we can do to guarantee that taxpayers will not waste their time, they will not waste their money, queuing up on the 17th for us to end up with another process that is annulled. That's all.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's Ambrose Weda and Edwin Sifuna, who are lawyers, and that's the way